On today's show, holy hot damn bazinga goomba, Juan Soto got friggin' paid reacting to the big blockbuster news of the offseason, Juan Soto being a New York Met, as well as some other major deals, like Tyler O'Neill going to the Baltimore Orioles, Mr. Willy Adames going to the rival San Francisco Giants, all sorts of deals, reacting to them, what it says about the Padres, and then answering some of your questions and comments because it is the Mailbag Monday. So, let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Monday, December 9th. As always, I'm your host, with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter /X and also Blue Sky at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Also, you can check out on Twitter /X the account for the show. Just updates on the show if that's all you want, at LO_Padres. Man, it's been a crazy few weeks. I've been sick a whole bunch. I'm basically out of it right now. And we have a bunch of news to recap from this weekend, as well as answering some of your guys' questions, and it's going to be fun. Also, feel free to go check out Just Baseball. Since there is so much news to cover, go check out the newsletter, which I have been working on. You'll actually probably getting in your inbox a little bit later today, talking about some of the other big signings. So go check that out. And I'm also just writing for them in general at justbaseball.com. So go peep that if you want to support the work, you know what I mean? But yeah, lots to talk about. So let's just get right started with Juan Soto. Soto last night, and Jeff Passan did report that it was likely he was going to sign by the beginning of the winter meetings. Like we had a feeling that this was going to happen. And he did. 15 years, $765 million. Reportedly, the Yankees offered him 14 years, $760. They got outbid by the Mets. Your boy, he predicted the Yankees, because one of my things was I just didn't see a world in which the Yankees would just get babied and shoved into a locker by their crosstown rival. I thought that maybe Phillies, it's a little bit more tolerable. Dodgers for them, thank God for us, a little bit more tolerable for them. But that's still such not an egregious amount of money, because I think a lot of people are going to be talking about, is this contract worth? Is any one player worth that? I will say that in general conversation about how much money someone is worth, first of all, it's not about how much you're worth, it's about how much leverage you have to negotiate, right? That's really, really important. And it's also important to note that it's like a lot of players, the players who actually are the reason you watch the sport, do not make as much money as the people in baseball who do not play a single inning, right? So when we talk about how much money someone's worth, let's not get into that conversation necessarily. But when it comes to just as a player, in the baseball context specifically, not a broader societal context, man, it's a lot. It's a lot, and there's a lot to get into. Let me quickly also say, I forgot to mention, today's episode, guys, is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 of bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My apologies for the interruption of that. I'm so excited to talk about Soto. We've been waiting all offseason. I forgot to do the intro ad. I think that when it comes to the baseball context, though, it's a lot of money for one player. I think that the Mets lineup instantly gets a whole lot better. You've got him and my boy Francisco Lindor. You've got Mark Vientos. You've got Brendan Nimmo. You still got some interesting prospects. Can Brett Beatty break out for them? They've still got a really, really solid offense and just an overall solid lineup. I think that it might not necessarily have the high upside that the Yankees had, because of the combination of him and Judge was genuinely all that mattered, and that's why they won so many games. Like, it was just such a dynamic combo that they went for that. But I still think that it's a big move for the Mets. I want to just pour one out if anyone's watching that's a Nationals fan. I'm sorry that you lost Trey Turner, Juan Soto, and Bryce Harper, all former superstars for you, to every team in your division except the Marlins. Like, that's unfortunate, right? Like, that's not exactly fun if you're a Nationals fan. My other reactions to this are a little bit more complicated, because they have to do with the Padres. And I think that, this is a Locked On Padres podcast, so we got to discuss that. First of all, I think that it is really good for the sport that we don't just have one Death Star in the Dodgers that are the ones that can, if they want, outbid everybody no matter what. It's good that you have even frankly, even the Yankees, they lost out on this deal. And frankly, if Hal Steinbrenner, I think, is actually not going to get too much crap for this, assuming the Yankees go out and sign some other players, which I think they're going to. I think they're going to be hard on Alex Bregman. I think that they're going to be hard on, another starting pitcher. I think they're going to be like, we got to make it up to some of the fans losing this guy. We got to go out and sign guys, especially if it's out there that we were willing to pay one guy $760. You got to be willing to pay some other guys like $150, $180, stuff like that, right? But I think that when it comes to baseball, it's good that we don't just have one Death Star, right? And there's actually someone sent me a comment about, that we're going to get into at the end of this episode about the mailbag, about just the high spending and how it doesn't amount to automatically winning a World Series, and it doesn't. But this is more than that. And frankly, I'm just really surprised that he went for this much. I think, speaking of the Dodgers, my not even tinfoil hat, but I think that this very clearly, one of the things that this contract showed is that Ohtani always wanted to stay in LA. Because if Steve Cohen was willing to get up to this point for a player who doesn't provide the blockbuster intangibles like other marketing stuff, just having him on the team, having this player that transcends the sport and gives you an international audience, if that wasn't on the table, but he's willing to pay even more for Juan Soto, none of it deferred, by the way, then I think that tells you that Shohei Ohtani really just wanted to stay on the West Coast. Like, he just wanted to chill there. He was super comfortable there. He liked it. And frankly, I blame the Angels more for what happened there, because I really do believe that since the Angels reportedly were still at least having meetings with him, I think it suggests that, like, if they were halfway competent, that he would have stayed with the Angels, or at least there would have been a better chance. So that tells you he wanted to stay on the West Coast, and other teams didn't really have much of a chance. If Steve Cohen, because Steve Cohen had a meeting with Shohei Ohtani, I'm pretty sure the Mets did last offseason, and the fact that it dissipated pretty quickly, that tells me he just didn't necessarily want to be in New York and deal with that, hysteria that often comes with it. But my next reaction is with the Padres specifically, and I have to admit, I was dead wrong, and I need to apologize. I mean, not like I, killed somebody or anything like that, but I think that with this Juan Soto deal, right, this is a guy who declined 14 years, I think it was 15 years or 14 years, I forgot, $440 million when he was 22 years old for the Washington Nationals. One of the things that I have to apologize for is that I've been very critical of the Padres' irresponsible spending, and I don't mean that in terms of the players they spent on, but specifically that you spent so much money on Xander Bogaerts, Manny Machado, Yu Darvish, Jake Cronenworth, Robert Suarez, that you spent that much money when you had a Juan Soto on your team who was going to be a free agent, and maybe you should worry about spending your money on a player like that. Or at least saving enough money so you could go and get a player like that, right? Like, you just don't want to lose on a talent who's Ted Williams and whatnot, right? Like, he's just incredible. And I know some people are going to be debating, like, hey, he's not necessarily the best base runner. He doesn't play the best defense, so is he worth it as much? And I'm like, yeah, I agree. In that regard, when it comes to baseball context, not societal, that could be a problem with the Mets down the road when he starts getting up there in age and whatnot, and maybe some of the power dissipates. But I think that with the Padres, I'd been killing them for that. I think this shows that the Padres absolutely knew what they were doing, and AJ probably deserves credit. They saw, you know what, this guy is a freaking stud, and he's going to ask for a certain amount of money, deservedly so. He's going to be able to campaign for a lot of money because Steve Cohen's going to want him. You know what I mean? That he's able to go out there and get paid way more than the Padres would be able to afford. Way more than basically any team outside the Yankees and the Dodgers could afford, I think. And with so many team problems, with so many, I should say, holes, and just knowing that if the Padres did that type of contract and they missed or anything went wrong, they would be kneecapped for years because they don't have the reserves, I guess, let's call it, the backup, the break class in case of emergency type of money that I think those other teams do. And being able to flip him for just 1 year of service, which, don't get me wrong, got the Yankees to a World Series. Let's be very clear. Like, it was fine for them. But being able to flip that into not just Kyle Higashioka, who was a great catcher for you, who's no longer on the Padres, I understand, but being able to get some bench pieces in Randy Vasquez and Johnny Brito, and most importantly, being able to flip that into Drew Thorpe and Michael King. Drew Thorpe, who was then used for Dylan Cease. So ostensibly, you got your starting catcher who was awesome last year, and you got two starting pitchers for 2 years of control that are both ace quality pitchers at times. Ace quality pitchers. One of them was a Cy Young candidate in Michael King, and the other one has Cy Young stuff, even though he's not, I don't think, consistent enough as a whole to win a Cy Young during a season, even though he has the talent of your Burns, of your, your Sales, all players like that, right? I think that this shows that the Padres really, they didn't fleece the Yankees, but they did a damn good job at saying, you know what? We need a lot of starting pitching. We can't really afford Juan Soto right now. Let's go trade him right now. Get him for as much as we can at the moment. Really, really good stuff for the Padres. And they deserve a lot of credit. And like I said, I was wrong. I really thought that they, could have potentially extended him. I know that that's what the late Peter Seidler had wanted, saying, all the reports saying he would have tried his best to find a way. Might have been a little bit too much. I think Steve Cohen was like, bro, I want my dude. I didn't get Ohtani. Heck, I didn't get Carlos Correa a few years ago, right? We were supposed to get him for a whole lot of money. Then we had to back out of that because of the medical problems and whatnot. I think that the Padres, it gives them a little bit more grace in the fact that they lost Juan Soto. I think. Could just be me, though. So that's my reaction to the Juan Soto news. Absolutely crazy deal. And we have to see what other sort of deals happen. And guess what? There were other major deals that happened this offseason, or I should say this weekend. And we got to talk about some of them because they definitely matter, and I think they're really interesting. So before we do that, though, got to talk to you guys for a second about one of our sponsors, and that is a very tasty and yummy one. And let me tell you, Juan Soto is going to be able to afford all of the ones of these that he wants. But when it comes to comfort and joy, nobody delivers quite like Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off site-wide during their cyber sale at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code MLB. With 5 generations of experience, Omaha Steaks delivers constantly the world's best steak experience, and their gifting experts have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide during the cyber sale at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code MLB and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at Omaha. OMAHA steaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code MLB. Minimum purchase may apply, but go check out them juicy steaks, baby. Go check it out. Let's go Omaha Steaks. Woo! And just like that, everybody, we are back here thriving and vibing on the Locked On Padres podcast, your team every day. Again, go check me out at Javi on Twitter/X and Blue Sky, and feel free to send me questions. That way you can get them answered sometimes every Monday, which you'll be seeing at the end of the show. Let's talk about a couple more of the signings, though, because there were more than just one thing that happened this weekend. The biggest other signing was Willy Adames agreeing to a deal with the San Francisco Giants. Top shortstop on the market, 7 years, $182 million. I know that some people, initial reaction, they're like, you might not exactly understand what makes Willy Adames so great, but this guy has been a really proficient, excellent defender for a long time now. And you combine that with Matt Chapman, that you're cooking a little bit. Now, I don't know why his defensive statistics were like really not great this year. He had minus 16 defensive runs saved. But other than that, every year before that, like 8 defensive runs saved, 9, 1, 2, 8, and outs above average. He was 10 and 16. He's got a good glove. I think that some weird nonsense happened with him last year. And more importantly, is that he's got power. This is a guy who hit, let me just check really quickly. He hit 32 home runs last year, 24 the year before, 31 the year before that, and then 25 the year before that. He's been at least an above average hitter. Good player, I think, overall. And I think that he's got more potentially to grow in certain areas. I think that this is, a lot of people will also call this a little bit of an overpay, I think, and a little bit justifiably so. I think that Willy Adames is, I think that you're hoping that with this deal, he can be like a Lindor light, someone who, he doesn't have the best batting average in the world, but he's going to play really excellent defense, and combining him with Matt Chapman, that corner infield is going to be really good for them. You combine that, those two players, and then you just give some home run power, and hey, can he be finally a player to hit 30 home runs for the San Francisco Giants? Because they haven't had a player that has hit 30 home runs in a season since, I believe, Barry Bonds, which, guys, I'm not just like saying that. That's pretty nuts. So Willy Adames, really nice deal for them. I think that this is going to be, a team that, considering they just fired Farhan Zaidi this past offseason, I think that this is a really solid start to them finally getting something. Is a little bit overpay? Sure. But I think now that everybody sees Juan Soto's deal, it's kind of hard to say what is an overpay anymore. But bottom line is they've needed a player for a long time. So shout outs to Buster Posey and their new management. So nice deal for them. Shortstops with 20 plus home runs and 70 plus RBIs in each of the last 4 seasons. Only Willy Adames has done that. So pretty interesting deal for them. Curious to see if they do anything else. But there were more deals. Tyler O'Neill, my guy, agreed to, or at least one of my guys, he agreed to a deal as well with the Baltimore Orioles. 3 years, $49.5 million. Love this deal for the Baltimore Orioles. I was thinking, could this guy be a little bit of a sleeper, right? I thought that he could be a sleeper, maybe guy that maybe the Padres would be interested in if they aren't able to bring Jurickson Profar back. I think him signing, and you're probably going to hear about an Anthony Santander signing soon, especially with the Soto domino having now fallen. You're going to see a lot more of those outfielders like Teoscar Hernandez, who the Dodgers are reportedly still interested in re-signing. I think you're going to get those guys signing pretty soon, maybe even today, maybe even at the time I'm recording this podcast. But I was hoping maybe Tyler O'Neill could be a backup option. But I think that this shows you maybe that the Padres are really probably just going to bring Jurickson Profar back, do another little minor signing, and then hopefully Roki Sasaki is kind of the dream. But we'll see how that goes. In terms of this deal, though, as a whole, I really like it. I think what they did here was they got a player for less years, probably less average annual value as well than what Anthony Santander is going to cost, who was part of their team last year. And I've been on the record. I wrote about this for Just Baseball, and I also did an episode about it a couple weeks ago. I think Anthony Santander is just a really dangerous free agent. He could be super fun. He could be home run, go boom, and then the rest, who cares, right? Especially in a really good lineup like the Orioles had last year. But to me, I just think that the stat that he hit 44 home runs and he had an 815 OPS, like the fact that you were lower than an 815 OPS despite hitting 44 home runs shows that he's just a little bit too much of a one-trick pony. So he worries me. Tyler O'Neill, the reason I liked him, he's had incredible defensive skills before. He's had power almost equivalent to Anthony Santander's. Yes, it's inconsistent. Yes, he's had health problems. But the fact that he can draw walks, he can hit for a little bit of average every now and then, I just think he was just a better, well-rounded player for less money. The contract could be a total mess. It's possible that this guy's a total miss. He does have downside. While I think that at least, WAR isn't always a be-all and end-all stat, it's possible that just having Anthony Santander hit 30 home runs for you next year is great, right? But I think that with that 9% career walk rate, yes, he strikes out a lot, but when he's been on, he's been a really, really good player. So I think it's a pretty solid addition for them, and I think it would have been intriguing for the Padres, but we'll have to see, I guess, how that all shakes out. Another deal, though, that happened was Clay Holmes to the Mets. That's right, the Mets weren't done, ladies and gentlemen. They agreed to a deal with Clay Holmes, and Clay Holmes, by the way, has been very good for a friggin' long time. Specifically, his ERA is 2.85 in his past 3 seasons with the Yankees. 3 years, $38 million for him. Gets them another relief pitcher, who apparently they might be trying out as a starter. So that's going to be really interesting, and that might freak people out. But hey, we've seen starters, or relief pitchers, I should say, transition into these starting pitching roles and met with a little bit of mixed success, but it's not impossible, right? I mean, Michael King just did it last year with the Padres. I understand he had experience going 2 to 3 innings before, but even still, that worked. Seth Lugo infamously worked brilliantly. Jordan Hicks, a little bit up and down, but at least he's like, a player, I guess, in some ways. So I'm curious to see if they just got like a super nice deal on a number 4, number 5 starter, or at worst, a really good bullpen arm who I think gets a little bit too much crap from Yankees fans, as always, because their standard is going to be super high because they have the best reliever in the history of sports, right? Or the history of Major League Baseball, in Mariano Rivera. So they're always going to hold these guys to a high standard. I think it's a really interesting signing for them. And even if he's not going to be an amazing starting pitcher, I think he's a really good bullpen pitcher. I think he's solid. Even if he was just kind of falling apart this year, I think a lot of it was mental and just things not cracking his way at the right time. And sometimes his defense letting him down. But like that deal for them. Mr. Gary Sanchez, dare I say. Now we're getting into some of the other deals that I think affect the Padres. He agreed to a deal with the Baltimore Orioles. I don't know what to say. This is a little bit of an unfortunate one. Agreeing to a 1-year deal with them. And when you look at catchers throughout Major League Baseball, not many people have hit as many home runs as Gary Sanchez. And only home run leaders among catchers in the past decade, it's Salvador Perez with 229, Gary Sanchez with 184. 1-year deal for him. So, Kyle Higashioka, Danny Jansen, and now Gary Sanchez, all off the market. I think that Yasmani Grandal is my dream now. And I know what some people will say. Well, we got to hope for Salas. I do not think Salas is ready. I think starting some 19-year-old kid who hasn't even hit above an 80 WRC plus in double and high A, I'm pretty sure was his last point. He's clearly just not ready, and I think that you're forcing it. I think signing Grandal and maybe hoping that Luis Campuzano is the hive still alive, I think that makes sense. And frankly, I would just love bringing Grandal back. I think that would be really fun. I'm coming home. You know what I'm saying? So that would be really interesting. But, Padres running out of catching options, and I think that they have to make a deal for one of these guys at some point. Michael Conforto, my boy, agreeing to a 1-year deal. That's right, with the Los Angeles Dodgers for $17 million, a little bit of a high AAV. I now have no doubt in my mind that all these years that I've been saying that this guy has something, I know he hasn't been great. He only produced a 1.3 wins above replacement last year, 0.8 the year before, and then 1.5 the year before that. I understand, but this guy's been great before. He was a 4-win player. He was a player that hit, for 30 home run type of power. I think he's going to be really good for them. And if not, I think they could bring him in as a what's it called? Is he a lefty? Yeah, he's a lefty, and then they could bring in Teoscar as a righty. I think that could make for an interesting platoon of there. So we'll see if that continues on. And yes, I am worried that he's going to be awesome for them because everybody usually redeems themselves with the Dodgers. So really interesting deal for them. Otherwise, though, we also had Shane Bieber agree to a deal with the Guardians. This was an option for the Padres. This was a little bit discouraging. The fact that we had a report come out that the Guardians were thinking about trading Josh Naylor, who's one of their best bats, right? Former Padre as well, hit 30 home runs. It told you, oh God, classic Guardians, and this is what I always tell y'all, they're not going to spend, they're not going anywhere. And then they go around and re-sign Shane Bieber. Market probably wasn't super out there for them, and they're making a bet. I believe that there's an option in this contract as well. I think that that's fine. I think that it's a fine deal for them. He was a guy that I was looking at as maybe could he be this number 4 guy with upside for the Padres who probably don't have too much money to be able to throw at some of the top guys on the market outside, Roki Sasaki, which is the dream right now. 1-year deal with an option, fine deal for them, but was a target that I was hoping the Padres could go after. And then lastly, Garrett Crochet rumors, just want to talk about that really quickly. Padres reportedly still in there. They're one of the teams that were first reported to be interested in the first place, but reports say they're still probably not willing to move Leota DeVries or Ethan Salas, which for the record, I think is good. I don't want to trade either of those guys. I think DeVries is about to be awesome and probably awesome faster than Ethan Salas. But I will say that I would not be surprised if they're a little bit more willing to make a move if Roki Sasaki does not become theirs, and especially if they're unable to and especially considering that Joe Musgrove is out for this season. I think that you combine those two things happening, you might see a Salas or DeVries get moved, which would make me nervous even if it could be a great pitcher to really help out this pitching rotation. So we'll have to see, but that's it. For the main news of the big signings, Blake Treinen also agreed to a deal with the Dodgers. He's very good, no surprise there. So they're having a good offseason. Nothing from the Padres just yet, but don't lose hope, folks. And we're going to talk about some of your folksy questions in the mailbag segment right after this, guys. But first, I need to talk to you about a longtime sponsor of this podcast. That is FanDuel, ladies and gentlemen. And here's the thing. You want to get ready. You want to get set. You kneel down, whatever it's called. You get set, put arm on the floor. You want to tackle the action for the football world. All my football lovers here, especially in the States. Go check out America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel, because right now customers can bet $5 and get 150 bonus bets if you win. $150 in bonus bets if you win. That would have been crazy. 150 bonus bets, that would have been wild. But let me tell you, they have wild offers all the time outside of just this one. If you want to bet on the NFL, they've got you. All of your live bets all in one place. They've really got you covered. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And just like that, everybody, we are thriving and vibing into the final segment of this podcast, the Mailbag, where we respond to some of your questions and comments. Thankfully, and if I missed some of your YouTube comments, I tried to scroll through a lot of them. I'm still getting a little bit spammed from the Dodger stuff from the past few weeks, so I haven't seen necessarily everything on YouTube, but I tried to address at least some of them. Let's get into it. First, from on Twitter, at Casey Lee says, what's more likely? Padres make a trade tomorrow or they sign a player? This was asked yesterday. I think the more likely thing is that the Padres, I don't know if you're going to get a signing immediately. I think that if you were to see something happen, I think that it would be like a Jurickson Profar, right? I think that you could see that getting announced. I think you could see them announcing, frankly, a catcher, like I was just saying before, like just get that out of the way. Only a small deal for them. I really do think that since we haven't heard much, don't get me wrong, it's not that the Padres have always been a team that you usually get the tea leaves suggesting when they're about to make a move. It feels like they haven't made a move that's been all that shocking. Josh Hader, maybe, when they made that trade, but that trade in that moment, we hadn't heard too many rumblings about it, but we had heard rumors about it like heading into in the 2020 season that they were interested in him. So there's usually at least some evidence of when they're about to make a big signing. I do believe that the biggest signing they could possibly make is Roki Sasaki. That's just what it feels like to me right now, especially with some of these other signings already happening, like Shane Bieber, who I mentioned before, like Tyler O'Neill, who I mentioned before. But the trade, if it were to happen, I think that the only trade they'd be interested in is the Gary Crochet trade. I think that that's what they want to do right now. And since their priority would be Roki Sasaki, I think that that would have to be something they miss out on first before they do a trade. So I think you're likely more to see a signing, but I could be dead wrong. Next, from my guy Abdil, he says, what stat is your favorite and least favorite? I think I do WAR for both. I like you say WAR for both. I think wins above replacement is a really solid stat that does get really overused, including by yours truly sometimes. I do admit that. I think that it puts some players into too much of just one bin, and I don't think it takes into account what the player literally did and how much they helped you win that season. For example, Xander Bogaerts, according to Fangraphs wins above replacement, which is the one that I prefer personally, because I feel like defense gets inflated too much by baseball references, WAR count, but he had a 4.6 wins above replacement season. Xander Bogaerts, according to Fangraphs. And just to give that like a little bit of context, that means that they only had him being like marginally worse than what Jackson Merrill did this year at 5.3 wins above replacement, or Jurickson Profar, who had 4.3 wins above replacement. And that's why WAR, to me, sometimes can be rough. Now, don't get me wrong. There's reasons for it. Bogaerts played like a solid, defensive stop at second base and shortstop. I'm sorry, no. This first year was shortstop. Like, he was solid there. I get it. But to me, I look at that and I say, how much did you feel like Xander Bogaerts really contributed to winning games when they needed it the most, right? He had a really bad first half, finished strong at the end of the season, but they were already so out of it. It was like, what? So this is really a 4.6 win player. So sometimes WAR can be complicated and I don't love it as a whole. But what I do like is that it'll help track both the defensive value and offensive value, as opposed to some other stats. I think my favorite stat is hard hit rate, and my least favorite stat is win probability. This goes for all sports. So if you're talking about baseball, I think that, when it comes to just an individual stat for baseball, it's kind of tough. I don't like wins. I think that that's an obvious thing for pitchers, but that's too mainstream. I'd say win probability is my least favorite thing. I hate projections when it comes to how many games teams are going to win. I hate things that project super long into a season based on just a couple small sample size, but overall, win probability, I always hate it when they bring it up on broadcast. I think it is the dumbest thing for a team to be up 8-3 and for them to tell me, hey, win probability, 84% chance that the team with 7 wins is gonna win. Okay, I don't care. I have eyes. I'm watching. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need you to tell me that the team that's winning is more likely to win. Drives me insane. Hard hit rate, I love it because I just think that it is one of the nice, easiest advanced stats to get into that shows you whether or not a player was getting super lucky. We talked about this with Cody Bellinger and Jurickson Profar. Bellinger, super low hard hit rate, still managed 26 home runs, and combine that with a couple other things, it tells you might have got a little bit lucky. Or Profar, really hard hit rate, might tell you that he didn't necessarily have all luck. I just think that it's a really nice beginning stat because if you're hitting the ball harder, most likely it's going to lead to more power, more home runs, and just more balls getting through the infield. So love that for sure. But I really love that question, guys. I'd love to hear everybody else's takes on favorite and least favorite stats. This one coming from @TonySue8860. A few days before the end of the year, I looked up the MLB players with the highest OBA. Okay. Now, I don't know on base and batting average. I think that's what you mean, on base batting. I don't know what OBA means necessarily, but whatever. Number 4, Luis Arraez. Number 14, Jurickson Profar. That's across all of both the American and National Leagues. Anytime you can have one player in the top 1 percentile, that's special. The Padres had 2 and have an opportunity to have those 2 again this year. The problem the team can be criticized for is utilizing 2 players that get on base often. I don't think there are any precedents, so to some degree, this is opinion without supporting data, but I'm for stacking both at the top of the lineup order. The problem with this is that it displaced Tatis, who has earned the number 2 spot since 1999. Tatis should give up that spot temporarily for the good of the team until either Profar or Arraez is no longer with the team. Profar also hasn't been that bad a fielder. I don't know what is dragging his rating down, but it's not anything I've noticed. First of all, according to data, multiple years in a row, Jurickson Profar has been a very bad fielder. Now, I think that maybe it does get a little bit stressed more by the advanced stats when you look at it, but I'm just saying, guys, like a -11 defensive runs saved and -13 outs above average is a gross for the Rockies, and then -8 and -6, which respectively in the same stats for the Padres this past year, is pretty bad. I think with him, he just doesn't get through the ball fast enough. I just don't think he covers enough ground, even if he does have a decent arm. But I could be wrong about that, but I don't think he's a very good defender. I think Arraez is a good player, but I think you have to remember that he does hit the ball on the ground a lot. He can be a little bit streaky. I know he was hurt last year, and he doesn't provide a lot of defensive value either. And I think that when it comes to the lineup order, I'm fine with the lineup order. I really think that there's more to this than just RBI opportunities. There's a reason why teams keep putting really quality high players that can hit home runs at the top of their lineup. It's because you see more fastballs. A player like Tatis has great speed, so him getting on base, you don't want to put him there. Giving him more at-bat opportunities, there's a reason they do this, right? I wouldn't mind them putting Tatis down in the order, especially with an Arraez and a Profar. I could see that happening, but I think there's a reason, guys, and I think that reason is what I just mentioned. It's a game flow thing. There's more to it than just RBI. So I do disagree a little bit, but I wouldn't hate to see them move him down the order. Brandon Evans 1306 says, if AJ Preller is going to do a crazy move this offseason, what do you think it would be? Crazy move? Biggest move would be Roki Sasaki. Crazy move, I think, would be like an Anthony Santander. I think something like that. I think bringing in a player like that and just saying, screw it, we just want power. I think that could be a big time thing for them. Walker Buehler would be a little bit crazy, only in the sense of you just brought in a Dodger. Like, that would be pretty nuts. But I think biggest move is easily Roki Sasaki. Craziest move would probably be something like that, right? Unless they do a trade and they move things around and you try and get Pete Alonso or something like that, I don't see it. Jack Flaherty, maybe? Jack Flaherty, not projected to go for too much. 4 years, $92 million, according to The Athletic. It's not impossible that they go crazy with that. But yeah, otherwise, I think that that's kind of the ceiling for the Padres offseason, which isn't a bad thing. Hey, it was a good weekend, guys. The Dodgers didn't get Adames. They didn't get Shohei, Juan Soto. Like, yeah, they made some improvements, but, at least they didn't get the biggest fish. Not yet, hopefully. Next up, from @Ramamurni says, Padres get Sasaki, Peterson, and Profar, and I will be a happy camper. Agreed. I think that's kind of where I stand. You get a new DH in Jock Peterson. Yes, he can't always hit against both sides of the plate. I understand that, but he was actually a little bit better last year at fixing that issue with his game. And I think the Padres can have, some sort of other bat off the bench that can do okay for them when they need to at the DH. I think it'd be fun. It'd also be fun because he would have officially played, I believe, for every team in this division except the Rockies. So that would be really fun. Why not? If we're going to pass Blake Snell around the division, let's pass our boy Jack Peterson around the division. We'll see. But I agree. I think that would be the dream offseason for sure. Next comment comes from my guy, EM-CZ4RD. In the past 20 years, only twice has the highest spending team won the World Series, the 2009 Yankees and the 2019 Red Sox. Does money help? Obviously, but at least the top 20 teams have a realistic shot of getting into the 12-team playoff. And in baseball, any team that's in can win. Lastly, every single team can afford to spend $150 million on their roster easily, but exactly half the league spent less than $150 million. The Pirates spending $85 million is a joke. Not even going to bother with the A's. And by the way, the Guardians, who spent only $93 million to get to the ALCS, imagine if they'd spent more. Maybe they get to the World Series. Either way, the biggest problem is cheap owners. Fix that first, then worry about owners that care about winning. Yeah, I think that that's a big thing. I think if you had like a salary floor of 150, like that's my thing. I'm 100% with you, dude. This is what I tried to say in my episode on the Dodgers, where like, don't get me wrong, you're allowed to make fun of them. I think that they are a bad development for the sport, but it didn't just pop up out of nowhere, right? This isn't Killmonger in the Black Panther movies. He's bad. Like, that's a bad dude, but he didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Like, they created him. You know what I'm saying? Really, that's a stretch of an analogy, but you guys get what I'm saying. And I agree with you. I think that if you're in the top, you don't have to be that big. But I do disagree a little bit about a little bit of your sentiment that only twice is the highest spending team. I don't know if you're saying this about what I'm saying, but I don't know if you're implying this. I'm not saying you have to be the top spending team. That has been shown clearly. You don't have to be spending what the Dodgers and Yankees are spending. But I do think what has been shown is you do have to spend if you want to win a World Series. You could have a competitive year. Make no mistake. But winning a World Series, not really. Past 30 seasons, only 3 teams that were outside the top half. So again, I'm not even talking about the top. Outside the top half of the payroll have won the World Series. Only 3 have won the World Series, and only one of them was a crazy one, which is the Marlins, and they were 25th in payroll the year that they won the World Series. And I think that the other 2 were like 16 and 17, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. Astros and Royals, I think, were there. Again, I could be dead wrong. And then 15 teams over these last 30 seasons. 15. So half of the World Series won over the past few years. You've been in the top 10 of the payroll. So you do need to spend. But I also agree. It's not the end of the world if you can't spend for Juan Soto. And I do agree, though. You got to stop with the cheap owners. Fix that. It's embarrassing. It really is. Like, the Marlins are spending $50 million probably this next year. Juan Soto's making more than that by himself per year. You know what I'm saying? You got to fix that stuff. But I do agree mostly with your sentiment. You can't just blame the Dodgers, man. And he also says, sorry about my fellow Dodgers fans. Good job on both videos. First one I watched was on Friday. My only concern about the viability of your career here is that you don't show enough hate for the Dodgers. LOL. That sells, unfortunately. Cheers. Yeah, maybe I got to quadruple down on my Dodgers hatred or whatever, and maybe more people. I don't know. Maybe you're right. We'll have to see. But everybody, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Send in all of your stuff. I will keep them in a little bank somewhere for next Monday's mailbag. Depending on what happens for the rest of the week, just to schedule out the podcast, if a big signing happens, especially for the Padres, obviously that will be what I talk about. But in terms of the rest of this week, we've got a couple of player reviews. We're doing Dylan Cease, Michael King, and the Padres bullpen. I have 2 of those already recorded, actually, so I'm ready to just release those, assuming no new news comes out, right? So that depends on the news. Also, still working on doing a podcast with the Locked On Angels friends. That should be a lot of fun, but they're going through some personal stuff that they got to get done first. And then also interview with our prospect boy, Mr. Ryan Berger. That should be probably Thursday, because we're probably going to talk on Wednesday or something like that, I think. We'll see. But that will be a thing this week. So just giving you guys a little bit of heads up on the schedule for the show. And yeah, that's it, everybody. Crazy, crazy times. And there's still a whole lot more to go. So until those next crazy times rear their way around, stay safe. And of course, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies. Take care.